time lags in certain films arriving somewhere. I think the importance to you of that nucleus of Eastern critics is that the only place that we really have any influence is in the small, neglected film. Believe it or not. I mean, The Godfather would have made money hand over fist whether or not any critic had written about it. The same thing would have happened to Star Wars. The same thing, in negative fashion, would have happened with, what was that midnight thing that swamped all the theaters? The Other Side of Midnight. I mean, trash can survive like nothing. And why not? I mean, you can be a trash lover, right? As long as you know that it's trash you're loving. And of course, we always get into my trash is better than your trash, right? I mean, that's trash, but oh, this is yummy trash. There are, that kind of film doesn't need critics. What really needs a critic is that rare movie that isn't going to knock everybody's head off, on which the studio is not going to spend $500,000 just for starters to publicize it and so on. And especially foreign films, which start out in New York, which need critical support. If they get the critic support, our contribution to you is that somebody in the Midwest is going to finally say, with this shortage of product and all, gee, I think maybe I will get that movie for my movie house. I think, did Cousin Cousine get anywhere? It seemed to me to have really gotten to many places in this country. There is a film that was made by critics and that traveled as a result. It wound up being the most successful foreign language film in the United States so far. I mean, it surpassed A Man and a Woman, not only artistically and in content, but, would you believe, in box office. And this is, I think, the major function. I think most critics know that you can't kill the bad, but sometimes you can help to give the good a deserved push. I'm not even sure that Rocky needed critics. Long before Rocky opened, you heard, oh, there's this sensational little movie. And nothing that was said about Rocky could keep it down, because it was just that kind of feel-good, simplistic, sentimental movie that reminded you of certain truths that we hold very dear, like take off your glasses and you're gonna be beautiful, you know? And it came just at the peak of our hunger for that kind of reassurance, which One-on-One tries to repeat for you on a sort of different middle-class level and with even more muddled notions behind it. But if you don't squint your eyes, it's refreshing to us suddenly. Again, the spirit of the times, the Carter election, when you hear somebody singing at the fade-out of One-on-One, which we'll play here if it hasn't, has it? It's about college basketball. The final song has the goal to say, love conquers all, and nice guys are coming in first. Well, I tell you, nobody said that in ages. Oh, we've known for years as a character in one of my favorite review skits that was a takeoff on Tennessee Williams, one of the characters says, "I may not know anything about love, but I know all about rotten." And that, it seems to me, has been what movies have been devoting themselves to for a very long time. I think there was there? Yes. Yeah, well, there are two ways of doing it. First of all, I have found, and we learned this on a national level, that very often in small communities, people say to the one movie house owner, or one of the two, "Give us some art, we are starved. And this is what we need." And the guy goes ahead and he brings in a good foreign film, and nobody comes to see it. Well, I was busy. I mean, had it run another 10 days, I would have gone to see it. By the time I got around to it, it was gone. Well, unfortunately, here was the national cry in our naivete. When was it? About 5-10 years ago. We thought that we were getting dirty movies. When you look back at those shocking movies of the late 60s, early 70s, it's like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm compared with the movies that are being made now. However, we all said, "Oh, where are those beautiful family movies that we all used to be able to go to? Why can't I go with my children and my grandmother once again? Not since The Sound of Music have I been able to have an intergenerational trip to the movies." Well, all over the country, small movie houses opened, assured their communities. A good part of it was a chain owned by Jerry Lewis, I'm happy to report, assured the community that they would run nothing but good, wholesome movies, and every one of them went bankrupt because people don't want to go to see nice family movies. Therefore, many a theater owner has really soured by saying, "Well, I tried and nobody came, but if I show New York, New York, I can balance my budget." There are a few theater owners across the country, and mainly in the Middle West, who have learned that if they will run a softcore porn movie for 4 days, they can then afford to run an art movie for 3 days. And a few dedicated men, I kid you not, are doing this, and they find they have to run really scurrilous stuff in order to be able to afford to bring a good foreign film to their community for 3 days. I mean, they'll play the good one on the weekend and the other thing during the week, because the fans of the other thing seem able to manage the time during the week, which not all of us can manage to do. But the big way of fighting the very commercial aspects of movie exhibition are, particularly in a university community, is to form a film society. Now, very few people know this, but when your schools have 16 millimeter projectors, these are bought with federal funds. Every taxpayer is entitled to the use of materials which are bought by federal funds. These are your tax dollars. And therefore, a respectable body of citizens should have access to that equipment. You can form in your neighborhood a group, and call yourself the Joe Blow Film Society. And if your members are willing, if you have access, as you well should, either through your public library or your public school, let alone your public-spirited university, but that depends. With your 16 millimeter equipment, you can then rent any film you want to see. And most films within a year or two are then reduced to 16 millimeter and can be rented. And the fine Bergman films, the Fellini films, all really the Truffauts, it just takes a little time depending on how commercially successful they've been. You can show, and if you have enough people, the rentals run anywhere from $50 to perhaps $150 for one showing. So it just depends on how many people you can get together, and you split the cost among you, and you are offering your theater owner in town evidence of exactly how interested you are and how much you yourself are willing to do. And I call it running a do-it-yourself film festival, which many communities in New York and in New Jersey and Connecticut are doing. Whether it's in the church basement for a series of Sunday nights, or in one of the schools for a series of evenings, and you can make yourself a profit if you're fundraising. But you can also see some damn good movies that your local movie house will not show. Yeah. The man who did it for 2 years, I think came out with a total loss of $10 million. Most of it was carried by American Express, which was the major backer. But I think it deserved to lose what it lost. I think most of it was pretty rotten, don't you? I mean, out of all those films of plays, I thought perhaps there were 3 that were well done and worth seeing. And I just think it was so badly done, with a catering either to actors who had no business being in the roles, but whose names were important to make the thing commercial. And the selection of plays was very bad. There were very few truly worthwhile plays among them. However, having lost $10 million, he announced recently that he was giving up culture, and he is the man who is now producing a movie called The Greek Tycoon. So that tells you where culture goes when it is laid aside. Yes? Star Wars tells us, and as I say, my theory won't hold water with every film that's made. Star Wars really tells me that, boy, have we been hungry to be kids again. And we just want to go and just be gathered in and told with all sorts of dazzling imagery and a kind of inane but very hip story, and with a straight face, that it's okay. Even in science fiction, the verities are eternal. And here it is, the prince and the princess, and we're going to all live happily ever after, right? And I think it's just grand. It dazzles you. And you can have, that to me is an intergenerational movie, because I was enchanted to watch a little boy across the aisle from me when I saw it, who was absolutely throughout the whole thing. And I regretted that my little boy was not there. But he's now 21. And he went with a girl, and they had a perfectly good time. They loved it. because just as I was brought up with Buck Rogers, he was brought up with Star Trek, and this is the culmination. You know, it's very much, I hope it isn't sold to television. I hope it will be released annually. You shouldn't see it more than once a year. I went back for an odd reason to see it about a few days later. I wanted my husband to see it. I went back to see it, and, you know, suddenly it becomes a very mechanical thing, and the wonderful surprise isn't there. But for me, it is a latter-day Wizard of Oz. I watch The Wizard of Oz every year, and even though I know it upside down, inside out, and backwards, what I'm really doing when I'm watching The Wizard of Oz is A, being the child I was when I saw it, B, being the mother who watched it with a 2-year-old and every year thereafter, and getting back all time remembered. And that's half the experience, you know, of reading books over and over and over. You almost stop doing it for the book, but you do it to be the way it was when first you encountered the book. And I think Star Wars has that great charm. I don't know. I'll tell you in 5 years if they've released it again by then. But I think we were very ready for that. And that is important because just as we were so ready for the disaster movie, oh, was there ever a time. Immediately after Watergate, starting with the Poseidon adventure, we wanted those great big disasters. We wallowed in them because we could say, it's not my fault. I had nothing to do with it. I mean, it's a tidal wave. It's an earthquake. It's not me. It's not my fault. And we needed that after Watergate because with that national tragedy, we were guilty. No matter what side we were on, we shared in a guilt. And boy, was it a pleasure to go through all this stuff and say, can't do a thing about it. Just relax and enjoy it. It depended. I mean, if you lived in California, you would not relax and enjoy earthquake. But the rest of us could just love it, you know. Or Towering Inferno. I imagine here you could enjoy it more than some of us could in New York or other places. But this was the great need. And I think you'll see that in movies too, the responses to movies. Things that will not attract us at all one year. It's the time that makes a film. That too is a fascinating thing because there are so many movies. Francis Coppola made a movie that came out early in 1967 called You're a Big Boy Now. Anybody remember it? It's been on television a lot. And it was about an adolescent. It was part fantasy. I'd say a young man of about 17, 18, having difficulties with his parents and with girls and everything else in a kind of surreal black comedy style. It was not a success. It was a disaster. It was an excruciatingly funny, witty, wonderful movie, I thought. 6 months later, the time was right. Along came The Graduate. Wow. But if you saw the two movies today, you will see that one is far better, especially in its depiction of period, in its contemporary reflections. It's not a construction the way The Graduate is. It's a better film in many ways. It was just 6 months too early. Some movies are 6 months too late for the initial public response. I caught the first half. What do I think the trend in movies will be? Or can I tell now? I don't think we can tell, what movies are going to be made. Well, it all depends on who's making movies. And unfortunately, the basic tenet of filmmaking, even though the old studio system is gone and there's been a diaspora and movies are being made by more independents and more individuals all over the country and all over the world, nevertheless, the tenet holds. If at first you succeed, do it again and again and again and again and again until it goes dead at the box office. And certainly you have seen that every movie breeds a part 2. They are already starting on Star Wars 2, correct? We've gotten the number 2 part of just about every successful movie. Jaws 2 will be out soon. So what is the trend? If Bobby Deerfield, which is opening this week, is a box office success, it might not start a trend because it's love story all over again. And it is written somewhere that about every 5 or 10 years we're going to get love story with the lovely young couple who meet, but alas, she is dead and he is a better man, and we're all crying. That mysterious disease that strikes them down. There are going to be genre movies because there is always going to be someone who says, oh yes, it is old hat, but I can do it better than anybody else can. And indeed, this is a very classy version, and it makes Love Story look pretty raunchy and superficial and young and everything else, because this one has Al Pacino and Mart Keller, and they are indeed quite wonderful. But you will be getting that kind of movie every so often. How many stories are there? But depending entirely on what makes it at the box office this year, you will find a repetition thereof next year. And at the same time, the only reason that anybody, let alone someone whose profession it is, let alone whose bread and butter it is, keeps going to the movies is that next week there is going to be the greatest movie ever made. And I will come upon it unexpectedly. But the greatest movie ever made, thank God, has not yet been made. And so there is the carrot on the stick. I don't know. I do think that, but this has been said time and again. They said it after Cleopatra in the mid-'60s. They were saying, the only movies that are going to be made are the little independent movies, like Rocky. This is after the success of Rocky. And the multi-million-dollar blockbuster, like Jaws and like A Bridge Too Far, and that kind of thing. Either you have to spend millions or else you have to spend 14 cents. I don't know. I think somebody's going to spend thousands and come up with a pretty good movie. I myself am impressed by the increasing quality of movies made for television. And I do know that it is fashionable to say on a campus, oh, I never watch movies on television. In fact, I never watch television. But we do. And if you watch judiciously, you can see some damn fine movies. And I think that television offers the best immediate future for aspiring young filmmakers. The quality of these movies, sure, most of them are still pretty simplistic and B-movie quality. But every so often you get an unusual film. And it's more watchable, in part, than the theatrical film that you see on television, because it didn't have to be butchered. It's been made in 7.5-minute segments. so that the interruption is generic in it. It's sort of made for it and frequently improved by it, but that isn't the point. But, for example, you can have the topical movie. You can have you can have the movie that nobody would pay a nickel to see in a movie house, but that people should see. I'm thinking of the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. I am thinking, of the movie that Alan Alda was in, the Carol Chessman movie that was just on this week. I'm thinking of the That Certain Summer. I'm thinking of My Sweet Charlie. These are movies that would have failed miserably in a movie house, but that got more than 40 million people to see them at once, minimally. Every one of these movies gets 40 million people watching, and if I were a young movie maker, that would be my first goal, because, small question, that is where the audience is. And you have been able to say a number of interesting things and unusual things. And this is, after all, the world of the $250,000 movie. And you can barely make a third of a theatrical movie. You can barely get started on making a piece of a theatrical movie for that amount of money. So that I think television is a very important factor nowadays in offering an outlet. I had always hoped it would be the outlet for the short subject maker and the documentary film. Unfortunately, it hasn't devoted as much of its time to formal film as I dreamed it would, but then it may well have to as time goes by. Yeah. Well, I do think that, unfortunately, the Academy Awards are the result of a popularity contest. And that popularity and success are the factors that make for the awards. I'm very dichotomous about the Academy Awards. Basically, I think we tend to forget who makes the awards. These are people in an industry. You get to belong to the Academy only if you are active in various branches of the industry. If you are a director, you will belong to the directors division, an actor. Not all directors, not all actors, not all producers, not all people involved in the business do belong to the Academy. I've forgotten exactly how many members there are. I think it's about 3,500 people who now belong. And this is only a segment. And to me, it's very much like a senior class getting together and saying once a year, now, whom shall we vote for? Let's see. Well, Charlie, boy, all through school, every time we've had a basketball game, Charlie has been selling those tickets like crazy. And, he's such a nice guy, and he's done just so much for us. Let's vote Charlie as most likely to succeed. And then you say, oh, she's so pretty, isn't she? And all the boys are crazy about her. And let's vote her girl most likely to. And so it goes. And I think that it is that kind of thinking that goes into the voting, because invariably It's kind of the safe and sane film. Now, can you imagine in a year when Network and Barry Lyndon were nominated, among the nominees, that they picked One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was strictly a 1976 movie that was kind of a cheap shot comedy. When you stop and think about it, it was a beautifully made film, very well made, with Jack Nicholson repeating the performance he had given in The Last Detail, of playing his kind of outsider, essentially the performance that he started in Easy Rider and gave in 5 Easy Pieces. He is a fine actor, but nobody really gets him to expand his range often enough. But what we were essentially doing with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was thinking that a bunch of sick people were kind of hilarious. And we were also half subscribing to that rather sophomoric notion that the wrong people are on both sides of the insane asylum walls. But that movie was selected because off the bat it was making more money. It was a far more successful movie than either Nashville or Barry Lyndon. It made money. It was a production by one of Hollywood's own, Kirk Douglas's son. It was made in Hollywood, not in Nashville and not in England. It was made in Hollywood studios, and it was part of Hollywood.